Tiga. Hai. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Here we are like to present our presentation. It's about Pride and Prejudice. Our member is contained of three people. The first one is Reza Abdulillah, and the second is me, Hastin Nursanti Syukur, and the third is Putri Nurkamaliah. So, without any further ado, let's just start the presentation. Here are the table of contents of our presentation. The first one is introduction, the second is character analysis, and the third is setting, fourth is history, and the fifth is summary, six themes, and the seven analysis and conclusion. The first one, introduction, will explain by Reza Abdulillah. Reza, time is yours.
Thank you, Hastin. So the first one is introduction. Pride and Prejudice is a novel written by Jane Austen that is published in the United Kingdom in 1813, and it has been adapted to a movie with Joe Wright as the director. The movie itself was released in the United Kingdom in 2005. And next, let's move on to the character analysis. So the first one is Elizabeth Bennet. The novel's protagonist, the second daughter of Mr. Bennet, Elizabeth is the most intelligent and sensible of the five Bennet sisters. She is well-read and quick-witted, with a tongue that occasionally proves too sharp for her own good. And her realization of Darcy's essential goodness eventually triumphs over her initial prejudice against him. Next is Fitzwilliam Darcy. A wealthy gentleman, the master of Pemberley, and the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. True, Darcy is intelligent and honest. His excess of pride causes him to look down on his official interiors. And next, Jane Bennet, the eldest and the most beautiful Bennet sister. Jane is more reserved and gentler than Elizabeth. And next is Charles Bingley. Darcy considerably wealth best friend. Bingley's purchase of Neverfield and estate near the Bennets serve as the impetus for the novel. He is a genial, well-intentioned gentleman whose easygoing nature contrasts with Darcy. Initially discourses the manor. He is blithely increasing about class differences. And next is Mr. Bennet, the patriarch of the Bennet family, a gentleman of a modest income with five unmarried daughters. And then Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bennet's wife, a foolish, noisy woman whose only goal in life is to see her daughters married. And next is George Wickham, a handsome, fortune-hunting militia over. Wickham's good looks and charm attract Elizabeth initially, but Darcy's revelation about Wickham's disreputable past clues her into his true nature and simultaneously draws her closer to Darcy. And next is Lydia Bennet. Lydia Bennet is the youngest Bennet sister. She is gossipy, immature, and self-involved. Unlike Elizabeth, Lydia flings herself headlong into romance and ends up running off with Wickham. So the next who will explain the rest of the character analysis is Putri Nurkamaliah. Time is yours.
Okay, I will continue the characteristic list here. First is Mr. Collins. He is a pompous, generally idiotic, clergymen who stand in to inherit Mr. Bennet's property. Mr. Collins' own social status is nothing to brag about, but he takes general pains to let everyone and anyone know that Lady Catherine de Bourgh served as his patroness. He is the worst combination of snobbish and obsequious. The next is Miss Bingley, Bingley's snobbish sister. Miss Bingley bears inordinate disdain for Elizabeth's middle-class background. Her vain attempts to garner Darcy's attention caused Darcy to admire Elizabeth's self-possessed character even more. The next is Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a rich, bossy noblewoman, Mr. Collins' patron and Darcy's aunt. Lady Catherine epitomizes class snobbery, especially in her attempts to order to middle-class Elizabeth away from her well-bred nephew. The next is Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, Mrs. Bennet's brother and his wife. The Gardiners, caring, nurturing, and full of common sense, often prove to be better parents to the Bennet daughters than Mr. Bennet and his wife. The next is Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's dear friend, pragmatic, where Elizabeth is romantic and also 6 years older than Elizabeth. Charlotte doesn't view love as the most vital component of a marriage. She is more interested in having a comfortable home. Thus, when Mr. Collins proposes, she accepts. And then the next is Georgiana Darcy, Darcy's sister. She is immensely pretty and just as shy. She has great skill at playing the pianoforte. The next is Mary Bennet, the middle Bennet sister, bookish and pedantic. The last is Catherine Bennet, the fourth Bennet sister. Like Lydia, she is girlishly and flirted with the soldiers. Maybe that's all about the characteristic list.
Okay, thank you, Kamal. And the next is about settings. Pride and Prejudice is set in 1812 and 1811 and 1812 in England. It takes place primarily in the countries of Hertfordshire and Derbyshire. Next is summary. Will explain by the first is by my friend Reza. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Hastin. The novel opens with the summary. The novel opens with one of the most famous lines in English literature. It's the truth. It is a truth, a universal acknowledge that a single man, a possession of a good fortune, must be in one of a wife. The statement is seemingly what Mrs. Bennet thinks as she sets her sight on the newly uh, arrived Bingley, who she is sure will make a suitable husband for her daughters. At a ball, Bingley takes an immediately interest in the beautiful and shy Jane. The encounter between his friends, Darcy and Elizabeth, is less cordial. Although Austen showed them to intrigued by each other, she, ref- she reverses the conversation on first impressions. The pride of rank and fortune and prejudice against the social interiority of Elizabeth's family hold Darcy aloof, while the pride of self-respect and prejudice against Darcy's snobbery hold Elizabeth equally aloof. The pompous Collins soon arrive. hoping to marry one of the Bennet sisters. Mrs. Bennet steers him toward Elizabeth, but the latter refuses his offer of marriage. He instead becomes engaged to her friend Charlotte. During these times, Elizabeth encounters the charming Wickham. There is a mutual attraction between the two, and he informs her that Darcy has denied him his inheritance. Okay, Hastin, the next is yours.
Thank you, Reza. And next, after that, after Bingley abruptly departs for London, Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy mounts as they become convinced that he is discouraging Bingley's relationship with Jane. Darcy, however, has grown increasingly fond of Elizabeth, admiring her intelligence and fidelity. While visiting the now married Charlotte, Elizabeth sees Darcy, who processes his love for her and proposes. A surprise, Elizabeth refuses his offer, and when Darcy demands an explanation, she accuses him of breaking up Jane and Bingley and of denying Wickham his inheritance. Darcy subsequently writes Elizabeth a letter in which he explained that he separated the couple largely because he didn't believe Jane returned Bingley's affection. He also disclosed that Wickham, after squandering his inheritance, tried to marry Darcy, then 15 years old sister in attempt to gain possession of her fortune. With this revelation, Elizabeth began to see Darcy in a new light. Shortly thereafter, the youngest Bennet sister, Lydia, elopes with Wickham. The news is met with the grave alarm by Elizabeth, since the scandalous affair, which is unlikely to end in marriage, could ruin the reputation of the other Bennet sister. When she tells Darcy, he persuades Wickham to marry Lydia, offering him a money. Despite Darcy's attempt to keep his intervention a secret, Elizabeth learns of his action. At the encouragement of Darcy, Bingley subsequently returns and he and Jane become engaged. Finally, Darcy proposes again to Elizabeth, who this time is accepted. And next is the themes. The first one is love. Love in this novel, Pride and Prejudice, contains one of the most cherished love stories in English literature. The courtship between Darcy and Elizabeth, as in any good love story, the lovers must elude and overcome numerous stumbling blocks, beginning with the tension caused by the lover's own personal qualities. Elizabeth prides make her misjudge Darcy on the basis of the poor first impression, while Darcy prejudice against Elizabeth poor social standing blinds him. For a time, to her many virtues, of course, one could say that Elizabeth is guilty of prejudice and Darcy of pride. The title cuts both ways. And the second is about reputation. Pride and Prejudice depict a society in which a woman's reputation is of the utmost importance. A woman is expected to behave in certain ways, stepping outside the social norms, make her vulnerable or to ostracism. This then appears in the novel when Elizabeth walks to Netherfield and arrives with muddy skirt to the shock of the reputation conscious. Miss Bingley and her Miss Bingley and her friends at the other points, the ill-mannered, ridiculous behavior of Mr. Bennet give her a bad reputation with the more refined it. And the next is class. The them of the class is related to reputation. in that both reflect the strictly regimented nature of life for the middle and upper classes in Regency of England. The lines of class are strictly drawn, while the Bennet, who are middle class, may socialize with the upper class, that is being laid in Darcy. They are clearly their social inferiors and are treated as such. Austin satirizes this kind of class consciousness, particularly in the character of Mr. Collins, who spent most of his time toadying to his upper class patron, Lady Catherine the Board. And the next is family. Family is an integral theme in this novel. All of the character operate within networks of family connection that shape their dedication and perspective. For the female character in the particular, the influence and behavior of their family members is a significant factor in their lives because the business of Mr. Bennet's life was to get her daughters married. The Bennet sisters constantly have to navigate their mother's plan and schemes, while male characters like Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley and Lady Catherine de Bourgh individual are judged according to the behavior of their family member, which is why Darcy pointed out to Lizzie that he is doing her a favor by proposing even though she come with embracing family connection. The them of family show that individuals never lead totally autonomous lives and that individual action have wider communal implication. And next is integrity. Elizabeth Bennet considered herself to have very high standard of integrity, and she is often frustrated and disappointed by how the way she sees other behaving, and she complained bitterly to her sister, like the more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human character. She behaved in ways she consider consist with her definition of integrity by refusing to marry Mr. Collins and Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth thinks it is very important to only marry a man she loves and respects, of course, despite the pressure to achieve economic security. And the novel promote the importance of integrity, but it also reminds the writer to not to be quick to pass judgment on who was it and who is doesn't. And the last is about gender. Gender is a key theme in Pride and Prejudice. The story takes place in a time when gender roles were quite rigid, and men and women had a very different set of options and influences. Marriage is pressing question of female characteristic like Charlotte Lucas and the Bennet sister because marriage is the only way women can achieve economic stability and autonomy. As upper class women, they would not have been able to work to earn a living our or life indefinitely. Marriage offer one of the only ways to move beyond their birth families. However, a woman's marriage literally rely on an impeccable reputation for chastity, and for women like Georgiana Darcy or Lydia Bennet, a reckless decision to trust the wrong man could permanently ruin their future prospect. Lydia elopement causes Lizzie to exclaim with horror that she is lost forever. If Lydia is sleeping with Wickham without being married to him, her reputation will be destroyed. And next is will explain by my friend Putri Nurkamaliah. Time is yours.
Okay, I will explain the last part here about analysis and conclusion. Although Pride and Prejudice has been criticized for its lack of historical context. It is likely set either during the French Revolution or the Napoleonic Wars. The existence of its characters in a social bubble that is rarely penetrated by events beyond it is an accurate portrayal of the enclosed social world in which Austen lived. She depicted that world in all its own narrow pride and prejudice, with unswerving accuracy and satire. At the same time, she placed at its center as both its prime actor and most prospective critic, a character so well transfied and rendered that the reader cannot but be gripped by her story and wish for its happy denouement. In the end, Austen's novel has remained popular largely because of Elizabeth, who was reportedly Austen's own favorite among all her heroines, and because of the enduring appeal to men and women alike of a well-told and potentially happily ending love story. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kamal. I think that's enough from us. Thank you so much for your attention. Maybe we can meet in the other presentation. And thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.